poker's legendary champions, next generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson.
Well, hello there, my friend. How are you doing today? And as always, this is the host of Chasing Poker Greatness and the founder of ChasingPokerGreatness.com, Brad Wilson. And today's guest on the show is Twitch partner and co-founder of Tournament Poker Edge, Derek Tenbusch. Derek is an amazing dude. He's one of those rare folks who have been in poker for a very long time and has come to love the poker community even more than playing the actual game itself. I know that may sound a bit counterintuitive, especially if you listen to the jaded grinders who are always talking about how slimy folks in our community are, but I 100% get where he's coming from. Even though multiple students in my community have made massive gains over the last year, including one who's went from 20k hands per month at 100 no limit in September to maintaining a 10 BB per 100 win rate over 45k hands at 200 no limit in November, to now shot taking and running like the sun at 1k no limit in December. What I genuinely value the most about my community are not the success stories. What I value the most are the relationships that I've been blessed with, and it's not even a contest. So today, in mine and Derek's conversation, you're going to learn exactly why Derek loves the poker community so much, the hilarious story behind him and his wife's move from Los Angeles to North Carolina, a greatness bomb on finding your why and pursuing life and poker on your terms, and much, much more. So without any further ado, I bring to you the hilarious and inspiring co-founder of Tournament Poker Edge, Derek Tenbusch. Derek, good morning, my man. How you doing?
Good morning. How are you? I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Doing very well. Enjoying this pleasant winter weather that is upon us.
No, it does not feel like we're approaching Thanksgiving, does it?
Absolutely does not. But 2020 has been an odd year, so nothing surprises me at this point. And typically, I like starting out the show by asking about your story. What's the story behind you getting involved playing cards?
Sure. So, I had played a little bit of cards and stuff as like a little kid, like for, pennies and nickels. I don't even know if we knew the rules or if we were playing right. Like we were so young that I'm sure like we thought straights beat flushes or something. I don't really remember, but I definitely was not like, I don't consider that any kind of beginning for me. Where it really kind of started was I was living in California working in the music business, and I had moved into a new neighborhood, and they had like a neighborhood game. So I kind of started messing around in that, and that was just like once a month or whatever we would get together, and it was all like, dealer's choice, basically, the standard, baseball. And
I have a lot of follow-up questions here because I know you're in Durham, North Carolina now. Mm-hmm. So how old are you, first of all, so that we can kind of set the timeline?
Yeah. So I'm 47. And I think at that time, so let's see, I would have been 26, maybe 27, like around this time where this neighborhood home game was kicking off.
What led you to California and then back to Durham? I mean, that's skipping around, but first, where are you from originally?
Yep, no problem. I'm originally from Michigan, the Detroit area.
Okay, that resolves nothing.
I know. Yeah. So I moved to so I lived around Detroit, and then we moved to northern Michigan, way up north, a small little town of 2,000 people. And I wasn't very old yet. I was only in 7th grade, but I definitely did not enjoy that move. It was just a real culture shock for me and stuff. So I basically picked up guitar, and I started playing guitar, and that led me to want to be a rock star, basically. So as soon as I graduated from high school, I was like, I got to get out of here. So I went to college in Central Michigan University, downstate Michigan, because I thought that was the big city. I was like, I got to get the heck out of here. But I only really went to college to play guitar. So I played in a band through college, and then I ended up going to grad school really just as an excuse to continue to be able to play in a band. I was like, well, if I go to school longer, I can keep playing. And eventually I realized like I was not a particularly good guitar player. And
when did you realize this? At what point in your journey to rock stardom?
I think I kind of knew it the whole time, but I was having so much fun, like it was maybe the best job I ever had, if you would ever call it a job. Like I was enjoying it. I enjoyed the people that I was playing with, and I kind of knew that it was going to end eventually, which I think is why I did the whole grad school thing. I'm like, well, here's an out, a year and a half like reprieve where I can continue playing, but I was pretty sure I was going to quit, as soon as that was over. So when grad school ended, I was like, well, now what do I do? I don't really want to do what I went to school for, even though I don't even know exactly what I went to school for. I have a communication degree, so I guess I went to school to talk.
Congratulations, making good use of your degree right now.
Exactly. So I just decided I was going to go be in the business side of the music industry. So I packed up my car. I had $300, and I got in my Dodge Neon, and I drove to Los Angeles, and I slept on a guy's couch for the first 3 or 4 months while I searched for a job in the music business. And I ended up, getting an entry-level job. And then I spent 15 years in the music industry in California. And then, so this actually curves right back to the story. So it's a perfect segue. So at some point I decided, my wife and I decided we wanted to leave Los Angeles, really on a whim. And we didn't really know where we wanted to go. So we kind of did it randomly. I've told this story, I think, once before, but essentially we went on Travelocity, and they used to have these things called last minute deals. And it was basically a thing where like you could leave tomorrow and you could get like a hotel, airfare, and a rental car or whatever for like $200. It's just basically, I think they're just filling empty space. So I was like, well, there's one to Raleigh. I said, maybe I'll just fly to Raleigh tomorrow and just see what it looks like. So I flew to Raleigh, and this was before cell phone cameras. So I used a video recorder to like record some houses that I toured with a real estate agent. And 30 days later, we had sold our house in California, and we were moving to Raleigh. So yeah, it was very random. And people are like, well, you must have had family there, or I was like, no, just moved to a random place. But it ended up being, a really great decision. We've enjoyed our time here for sure. But what ended up happening is, when we made that decision, I realized that if I ever lost my job in the music industry, because I was working from home, but I realized that if I ever lost that job, I'd probably never get back in without leaving North Carolina, because there's really no music industry here. So that did eventually happen. But before that, so I lost my job in the music industry. So when I was in the music business, I was basically going out 4 or 5 nights a week, socializing, going to shows, going to concerts, traveling with bands, things like that. And when I no longer had that, I was going insane. Like I was home 7 nights a week, and I'm sure my wife was going even more insane than me. But we went to a bar/restaurant one day, and I saw a flyer on the wall for a pub poker league or whatever. And I was like, oh, here's a perfect excuse for me to like just go out 2 nights a week or whatever and get out of the house. I wasn't really going because it was poker specifically. It was just like, here's something I can go do. It's free. And like you won like a gift certificate or whatever if you won the poker tournament. So I started going to that 2 nights a week or so. And I just ended up loving it. Like it was the first time where I really started to like play no limit tournaments. It's the first time where I started to like appreciate strategy and stuff. So then, that led me to the 2+2 forums, which led me to training sites, which led me to buying like Harrington on Hold'em. And the next thing I knew, I was addicted to poker.
Full blown poker player. What'd the wife think?
She was cool with it. I think I had always sort of, and I should mention, my wife and I met when I was 15 years old. So we've been together pretty much our entire lives. So she's always known me to be the guy who like does crazy things, like plays in rock bands or moves to California to be in the music business, or
moves to Raleigh.
Randomly moves across the country. So it wasn't like anything new to her. And as she once said, it's better because at least now I'm home, because I was mostly playing online poker. I didn't do a lot of traveling to play live circuit or anything like that. So she was like, at least he's not out, driving 4 hours to another city with a band and then getting home at 4 a.m. And so I think she actually kind of liked it. The money wasn't as good because I wasn't good, but yeah, I think she was cool with it.
How did y'all survive with you losing your job? Was she working?
Yeah, she's it's kind of weird in this day and age, but she's actually worked for the same company for I think coming up on 25 years.
Wow.
So she's always had a career. And one good thing so I worked for EMI Music, and they're well, they don't exist anymore, but they were an English company and England-based company. And one good thing about working for a company from there is that they are really good with taking care of their employees. Amazing benefits, great 401k, all that kind of stuff. So when I did leave, I got a great severance package. So it allowed me a lot of time to sort of figure out, well, kind of the same question I had when I left college. Well, now what do I do? Because I'm not going back to the music business. I'm not making a living playing poker. So I got to figure out something to do with my life.
Right.
I had some time. Like, it wasn't like I was rushed,
And poker grabbed a hold of you. Do you remember like the day that was like, okay, I'm just going to keep playing this game. I'm going to invest all of my energy into poker instead of trying to find another job or trying to start a business. I'm sure you had other things that were kind of brewing in your mind.
Yeah, I think it was kind of like I don't think it was like a one incident thing or an immediate effect. It kind of developed over time. I think it was a gradual recognition of the fact that you could actually make money in poker, but not at the poker table. I think that was kind of the thing that made me realize, oh, I could actually do this because I can do other stuff around poker to make money, and that's kind of what led to starting TPE and starting podcasts and things like that. Was really just, I loved being around poker. And I think that was a realization that I had eventually. I don't even know that I ever loved the game of poker as much as I thought I did. I think I loved the poker community as much as I thought I did.
That is a very different path than most people, I think.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. There was a time period where I spent a lot of time studying, watching videos, getting coaching, all that kind of stuff. And I enjoyed that part of it. But I think the thing that kept me coming back year after year after year was all the friends that I had made, the ability to socialize with people. And it's been immensely valuable over the last 9 months because it's kind of been, for many of us, our only social circle, So it's been really good. But yeah, I think that's the thing that kind of kept me in it, was the whole community aspect. And probably the thing that will keep me in it, even if I stop playing, I'll still probably be involved in it some way or another. I like to think anyway.
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for this podcast, I would just spend my days talking to my cats, I guess. I don't know. I don't know exactly what I would be doing without my students and my community and interacting with my podcast guests. It's been a nice reprieve in this time of COVID. Just having different people to talk to, because like it's tough out there as far as socialization goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's good too, because everybody's kind of going through it in different ways. Some people have been very directly impacted by it. For a lot of people, maybe they lost their job, or maybe they lost a family member. And then other people, it's, a little bit more indirect, where it's like, well, I haven't, directly suffered, but my friend's family is suffering or whatever. And kind of the ability to communicate about that and talk to each other about it, I think is incredibly helpful from a mental health standpoint.
For sure. And tell me about Tournament Poker Edge. How far into your poker career were you? And how did that come about?
So this would have been 1990. No, that is not right. It would have been
Let's start over.
It would have been 2009-ish, I guess, when the earliest inklings of TPE came about. So I had met several people through the 2+2 forums, and one person in particular, Ron Fez Buddy, who's my business partner in TPE, or one of my business partners. And we would talk in the 2+2 forums, the strategy forums, and things like that. And then 2+2 kind of got to a place where it was a little bit contentious, and I don't know. It was kind of during that era where you'd post like what you thought was an interesting river spot, and 7 people would just say fold pre or whatever. And you're like, well, this isn't really doing me any good. So we actually split off and started like a private forum, which was called LOL Nice Squeeze. And there were probably 40 or 50 people in that group. And most of us were kind of all in the same place in our poker journey or whatever. And we would just share hands and talk strategy and, talk about life and other stuff. And at one point we decided we should all meet up sometime. Like, why don't we go to Atlantic City for this WSOP circuit event, and we'll hang out and play some poker and actually meet in person. And I think maybe 10 or 12 of us, I think, all went to this thing. And me and Diego, Ron Fizz buddy, we sort of gravitated towards each other because he was a programmer, web developer, marketing guy. I came from a marketing background, and we got to talking about the idea of building a business in poker. And we weren't really sure what that was going to look like. We had no idea what to do. We just were like, it would be fun if we could just like start a business, and maybe if it makes money, that'd be cool too. But if it doesn't, it would just kind of be fun from an entrepreneurial standpoint. So we went through a big list of things that we talked about doing. Surprisingly, some of them actually eventually became businesses that we did not start, but we thought of back then. But we kind of settled on the idea of doing a training site, even though there were several of them around at that time. None of them focused specifically on tournaments. And we wanted, that was one of we had the same frustration, him and I. We were members of several training sites, but sometimes you'd watch the latest tournament video, and then you'd have to sit through like a cash video and then a sit and go video and a Raz video or whatever until 30 days later, the next tournament video finally came out. And we were like, wouldn't it be great if there was a training site where it was just all tournament videos? So we just decided on doing that. And like I said, we didn't really expect much of it. We were just like, it'll be fun to build. And if nothing else, we build a kind of a bigger, better community that we like the one we already have. And maybe it actually pays for itself. So yeah, we kind of put this business plan together, and the model was basically such that we thought we could be profitable in 9 months. And we ended up being profitable in 30 days. And here we are almost 11 years later, still going.
Still going strong, still profitable.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it almost didn't work out that way because we launched Tournament Poker Edge on April 16th, 2010. I think that's right. And almost exactly 1 year to the day later was Black Friday. And we were like, oh no, this could be the end. And not immediately, because people had like monthly memberships or quarterly memberships, but within some time, I think we lost something like 60 or 70% of our customers. Just, people kind of saying, oh, I can't play anymore, so I'm out or whatever. So we were like, this could be the end. Like, it was going so good, and we might just only last a year. And you always hear that saying, like, most small businesses don't make it through the first year. And we were like, well, at least we made it a year. Like, that was good. But so we made some tough business decisions, kind of changed the way we were doing things, changed our marketing strategy. And slowly but surely, we just kind of crawled out of it. And yeah, here we are, still grinding away.
And that decision to keep going, I'm sure it's one that weighed on you. And you said you made some tough decisions. What did those decisions look like?
So we had a bunch of we had different owners at the time. There was sort of an ownership group, but a lot of those guys basically couldn't play poker anymore, because at that time you didn't have all these options that we kind of have now with ACR or Ignition, they were kind of around, but nobody really knew if they were safe, and nobody was really playing on them. So a lot of the guys were just like, well, I'm just going to like take some time off. But it's kind of convoluted, but basically our whole model was based on the fact that everybody who had ownership in the site made content. So if those people or even me just all of a sudden stopped making content, then we don't have a business anymore. So we had to kind of think of, well, what can we do? So we essentially just had to buy a bunch of people out and then sort of think about how to redistribute that money. So that, so like the very earliest days of TP, everybody who was making videos was an owner. And now none of the people making videos are owners, with the exception of me actually Mark Galiotto too. So me and Mark occasionally appear on videos, but for me, it's only to get my game ripped apart. I don't actually do any coaching or anything because I don't think I'm good enough of a teacher. But so yeah, that was like one of the big decisions. But there was kind of a lot of other like just smaller things too, do we have to cut how much we pay pros? Do we have to release videos at a slower rate? Do we have to charge more or charge less? What do we have to do to like get people back in? So there was a lot of sort of testing, A/B testing on what was working and what was not. But it feels like we kind of made the right choices.
Yeah, that was a very tough time for all of the poker world, really. And as somebody that played pretty much solely online after Black Friday. I mean, you said that, we didn't really understand the other options that were available, but it was also like, I'm not trusting anybody. Like, how do I trust another operator at this point when like Stars, Tilt, UB all disappear into dust, and then Lock Poker was a thing that I investigated and was considering depositing on, and like I read about them on 2+2, and I was like, what the hell is this? Like, they're not paying people out. Like, they're still taking deposits. What is going on? So there was like almost no trust in the poker community of the platforms. Like, it took me 4 years to even deposit on, Bodog, which may have been Bovada at that point and turned into Ignition eventually. But yeah, it took me like 4 years before I made another online deposit. I just said, okay, I'm just going to play live. I don't trust anything. Yeah, it's a very dark time.
Yeah, like I think for people who maybe have come into the poker world in the last 5 or 6 years or whatever, they might not realize, because it's almost, it sounds bad, but it's almost kind of like people almost expect that you could possibly lose your money these days. So it's almost like, well, why was that such a big deal? But you got to think in that time, like that was a company run by essentially our heroes, right? It was like, that's Phil Ivey and that's, Helmuth and all these people who like we looked up to and respected. And it's like, well, if they took our money, and obviously you could do 7 other podcasts about who really stole the money and who didn't and who's to blame. But from a casual poker player's perspective, it's like, well, if I couldn't trust them with my money, I'm surely not going to put it on this site that has no employees listed. Nobody knows who runs it. Nobody knows who's in charge. So it definitely took some time. And I jumped in like relatively quickly into some of those sites, but like at very small stakes. I was just like, well, I'll just play on there, and if I lose my money, then I'm losing a couple $100 or whatever. But I'm definitely not putting 4 figures on any of those sites.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even just the players, right? It's not even our heroes. Like, poker advertising spots were all over ESPN and on, NFL Sunday, like Full Tilt ads and Pokerstars ads and UB ads. I mean, they were ubiquitous. They were just on the most popular programming in the country on a regular basis. And like, we just felt overly safe, and then the DOJ just kind of pulled the rug out from under everybody and caught Full Tilt clearly with their pants down and their hand in the cookie jar, and they couldn't distribute the funds. And then that was like a massive just a seismic shift in the poker world where in 2010 the pros were kind of celebrated, right? They were like, you wanted to play with the pros. That was Full Tilt Poker's tagline and their slogan. And now in 2020 it's like, fuck the pros is almost the tagline of a lot of poker operators. And it's just kind of crazy how the sentiment and how the messaging and how everything's changed over the last decade, and kind of how it's like now people that play online, we expect ACR to just kind of disappear into dust at some point with everybody's money. Like that's my expectation anyway. I don't know if anybody else expects that or not, but that's mine.
Yeah, I think I'm similar in that I guess I don't necessarily expect it, but I just will never be shocked at that happening with any operator at this point, because I mean, all it takes is it doesn't even have to be the operator necessarily. Like, it could just be a government entity going, oh, we're finally going to focus on this problem over here, or what they see as a problem. So yeah, I mean, people hit me up all the time because I play primarily on ACR, and people hit me up all the time and say, oh, is it safe? Do you trust it? And I'm like, I mean, I trust it as much as I can trust any poker site at this point, I guess, and I know it's not like the greatest answer, but it's like, if you want to play online and you live in America, you basically have like 3 options. So pick which one you think is the best for you, based on your circumstances, and roll with it, or go play live. Like, those are pretty much your choices.
Yeah. If you live in like 92% of the states that don't have any regulated online poker, like if you're part of the 8%, the lucky 8% that lives in like PA or New Jersey, Nevada, those states, then yeah, you're good to go. I would be extremely shocked if like wsop.com disappeared or Pokerstars. I don't think that's happening, but like, Ignition and ACR, I think Global Poker may be okay. I know that they're actually have structured their platform to where it's technically legal through the sweepstakes model, but Yeah, I mean, it's it's a very crazy world, and don't be surprised if your funds disappear. Don't keep more money than you're willing to lose overnight in your online balances.
Yeah. And the good thing too, and I tell people this all the time, it's a little easier now because back then, even though these sites were quote unquote legitimate, it wasn't that easy to deposit or withdraw on Full Tilt or PokerStars. At least it wasn't for me. So it would be like, this card would get denied, and then I'd try another card and it would get denied, and then I'd have to call my bank and tell them, and they'd be like, no, you can't. And then when you cash out, you get a check 3 weeks later from like a tennis ball company in like Canada or whatever.
If you're lucky.
Yeah.
If you're
exactly.
unlucky, you get the one from Singapore. And
right.
You take that one to the bank, and they're like, what the hell is this?
But at least now with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, like it's super easy to deposit. I just did a withdrawal recently, got it within 24 hours. So there's really no excuse anymore to keep anything but maybe a few days bankroll on a poker site. I'm not necessarily that safe about it, like I probably should be, but you can be, and it's really easy. And especially if you're in the poker community enough where people who you can just be like, hey, can you ship me $50? Want to play this tournament. You could just settle up. Don't do trades with people you don't know. But if you know people, it's super easy to get money on and off these days. So it's like, sometimes people are like, oh yeah, I got 15K on my account. I'm like, why? It's like 6 months of buy-ins for you. Like, dude, get some money off.
Yeah. If you're playing 2K and L, then maybe 15K makes sense. Yeah. But if not, then probably not going to be worth it over the long run.
Yep.
And yeah, if you've been averse to learning how Bitcoin works, then just man up and figure it out, because Bitcoin has been, saved me from having to go to the bank and explain where this $3,000 check from Singapore came from and why I'm getting it.
Yeah, and you get a lot of people too. I hear it every day in my Twitch stream. It's like, I don't really trust Bitcoin. It's like, you don't really have to trust it. You just use it as a method to shift money back and forth. As soon as you get the money, you could just transfer it to cash, US dollars. Like, you don't have to hold Bitcoin to use Bitcoin as your payment method. And they're like, oh, I'm like, it's as easy as signing up for PayPal. I'm like, do you have a PayPal account? Cool. Then you can get a Bitcoin account.
Yeah. I trust Bitcoin more than I trust any of the unregulated poker operators. That's for sure, as far as disappearing overnight, right?
Yeah.
Jason, tell me about presence. Why did you think presence was the missing weapon in the arsenal of poker players?
So everyone's a mindset champion when they're running great, right? But when you're getting crushed day after day and you haven't booked a win in forever and the confidence just gone, and you're trying to do this thing that you read about in a book or someone told you about, being logical and being happy that the money went in good, when all you really want to do is cry and hit something at the same time. Like, how are you supposed to be logical in that moment? But that's the only moment when you really need it. What you need in that moment isn't mindset. You've already read all the mindset books and you already know what you're supposed to think and what you're supposed to do. What you actually need in that moment is presence. Presence is the ability to connect the dots between who you want to be and how you can actually be that person when you need it most.
So let's cut to the chase, right? Like, how do you do it? How do you stay more present when you're at the poker table?
Well, you get there by first deciding that you want more, right? That you want to grow your intuition, that you want to create more flow in your life, and that you want to reach your full potential as a player and as a person. And once you get there, you can start trying out some of the exercises and practices that I've put together. If it feels good, if you're enjoying it, you can keep going, right? And if you keep going long enough, eventually you'll find that you're just playing at really high levels, that you feel good with low stress, and you're enjoying your experience a lot more, not just at the table, but away from it as well.
I personally would love to have as much presence as I possibly can in my day-to-day life. And if you, the listener, right now wants to add some presence to your game, visit pokerwithpresence.com, join Jason Su's email newsletter, and then schedule a free consult with the master of presence himself. One more time, that's pokerwithpresence.com.
What would you say is the most unexpected thing that's come from your poker journey?
I think, I guess in hindsight, it's not unexpected, but I think at the time it probably was. Is just I think about all the people who I would not have met if it were not for poker. Meaning, people from different countries or people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, or And, any of those kind of different factors, like kind of like when I was listening to the podcast, I was listening to the one with Merv on it, and I was like, man, Merv, I got to hang out with Merv at the TPE meetup in Vegas that one year. That was really cool to meet him. And I would have never met this random dude from Australia if it had not been for the poker community. I think about it all the time too with Carlos Welch, like he basically just showed up at a meetup one time, and we've been like really good friends since. He stayed at my house. We've traveled to play poker together. We've lived together for short periods of time. And I'm thinking, man, I was some music industry dude from North Carolina. He was a teacher down in Georgia. Like, I don't really know how our paths would have ever crossed if it wasn't for this great game,
Yeah.
So
Carlos is an amazing dude. I love it. Yeah. He's been on the podcast a couple of times now, and just an awesome guy.
Yeah, he's definitely one of my heroes. Like, I love everything about him. I love the way he lives his life. I love his outlook on life.
Oh, I could see that. I could see you two guys getting along well. The dude that arbitrarily moved to North Carolina from LA, and the dude that lives in his car because that's that's how he wants to live his life. He doesn't want to be tied down, and he's just, following his own path. I think that you two guys are kind of birds of a feather, right?
Yeah, we've had many conversations about those kind of topics, about the idea of like never having a job you hate, never getting tied down in a situation that you're not happy in. So yeah, he's one of my favorite people.
Yeah, mine too. When you think about joy in your career, just in the realm of cards, what's the first memory that comes to mind?
I mean, this is going to sound weird because I didn't cash for any money, but I remember when I first kind of started, back in those bar league days when I started to like kind of get serious about poker. I remember saying to my wife, I'm like, there's a WPT event up in Atlantic City. It's there were other events, but the one I wanted to play was a $500 event. I was like, I'm going to go drive to AC and I'm going to play this tournament so that I can say that I did it once in my life. Like, I'm going to say I played one live tournament. And not just like a local tournament, but like a tournament with the WPT brand, And so I drove all the way up there, and I ended up busting out like late in day one. But I was so like, I didn't even care that I'd busted because I was so happy that I'd played that one tournament. I'm like, now I'm done. I never have to go play another live poker tournament again. I did exactly what I was set out to do. And I can even remember driving home being like completely content and satisfied that I'd gotten to play. And one of the great things about it was that TJ Cloutier played at my table, who was not one of my favorite poker players in the world. I didn't dislike him, but he wasn't like one of my idols or whatever. But I remember thinking, wow, this, you always heard that saying, like, poker is great because anyone can play with the best or whatever. It's not like golf where you have to like be good enough to play with Tiger Woods. Like, you can just sit down and play with Phil Ivey or whatever. And I was like, I did it. I got to sit down and play with one of the all-time greats. So I was just like, smiling, happy, driving home. And I was, I got home to my wife. I'm like, well, I did it. That was fun. And then, of course, the next year I went and played another one in Vegas. And then before I knew it, I was spending every summer in Vegas for the World Series. But yeah, but that moment was just fantastic. It was like I had made it,
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, of course, you just play a tournament, and like, who knows who you're seated with at your table. It could be one of the all-time crushers, people that, you see on the old Full Tilt ads, those guys. The opposite question, when you think about pain in your career playing cards, what's the first memory that comes to mind?
I guess it's really not even like, yeah, it's weird. I was going to try to think about something more, but then I said, well, no, I'll just say the same first thing I thought of when he said pain. And I don't even remember all the details specifically, but whenever people ask me about the worst like poker beat I took or whatever, I always think of this one. And it was at the time I could still play on Stars, and I was backed at that time by Casey Big Dog Pocket Fives, Jarzabek. And so he had put me in the Sunday Million, but it was one of those like special Sunday Millions where I think it was like the 5th anniversary or something. So it was either like 5 million guaranteed or 6 or 8. I don't remember how many millions, and we were really deep. We were in the money, and I had like a top 20 stack or something out of maybe like 200 people left. And we were like, back then we used to like all hang out on Skype and just like, BS and talk about poker and, oh, I'm deep in this, or I just busted that. And I remember somebody opened under the gun and I had aces, and he had a bigger stack than me. So he had, I was deep. I was high up in the rankings, but he was much higher. And he opened on the guy, and I 3-bet quite large with aces. And he was tanking. And I'm like, guys, I think he's going to shove. And sure enough, he did. And of course, I called. And he had ace 10 of clubs and ran out of flush. And I remember looking and going, I would have been top 2, I think, in chips in a tournament with a 5 million guarantee. And this was much bigger than most tournaments that I played at that time. So it was like my one chance, like make the sick deep run. And it was just like pulled out from under me. And I've made some nice runs since then, nice-ish, but never, I think that was like that one in a lifetime chance, where I was like, I got this. And I willed it to happen. I was like, please shove. And I got what I asked for. But
yeah, careful what you ask for.
Yeah.
I don't play a ton of tournaments myself. I've always been drawn to the cash game side of poker, but every time I play tournament and go a little deep and bust out, it's always, that was the one I needed. That one that I lost. Right. That was the one that I needed. I would have been a top 3 stack. Like, that's the feeling almost every single time.
Yep. And that's why it feels so good when you win, because you remember all the times that you didn't, It's just like, oh, they finally let the cards fall the right way for the first time.
Yeah, you can enjoy it a lot more when you've had a bunch of near misses and a bunch of heartbreaks, and then you finally take one down. For those folks that just like sit down, like Chris Moneymaker, right? The first live tournament he ever plays, he wins the WSOP main. Yeah. Like, did he think that was like normal?
Right, I know.
Like, what was his expectation after that? I can't even imagine.
Yeah, he's like, this is easy. Which, I mean, I guess was great. That's what led to the whole Moneymaker effect, I guess. Was like, oh, well, if that dude can win, I can certainly win. He's just a dude from Tennessee or whatever. Like, anyone can do it. Turns out it wasn't that easy, but
it also turns out there is a large amount of variance in this game, and sometimes folks can just run good for 4 or 5 days, play pretty well, give themselves an opportunity, and get there when they need to.
Yeah.
What's some common poker advice you hear that you completely disagree with?
This is interesting. So I don't know. And this kind of goes back to something I was talking about earlier. I don't know if this is necessarily advice I don't agree with, but it's maybe a perception that I don't agree with. And I think I feel like I maybe wrote a blog about this like 8 years ago or something, but I can't remember. I think a lot of people feel like if you're not going to try to be good at this game, then why are you playing it, And I think that's really sort of sad. Like, I think it's okay to be somebody who really, really enjoys the game of poker, but doesn't necessarily have an interest in putting in 20 hours a week of study to get good at it. And I know that's an odd thing for an owner of a poker training site to be saying, but I just think I see a lot of people who fall into this study mode because they feel like that's what's expected of them, like they have to get better or whatever. But I think it's really important to like kind of sit down and evaluate yourself and think about what it is that you want from the game. Because I know a lot of people who would really enjoy this game and they study a lot. But I always say, oh, do you have like ambitions of, becoming a pro, or do you want to, make this your living or whatever? They're like, oh, no, I love my job. I would never leave my job. Like, that's what I want to do. I just enjoy playing poker for fun. And I'm like, so you don't necessarily have to be killing yourself in the lab, studying poker all the time. Maybe play more poker, because that's the part you really enjoy. So, I get people giving me a hard time all the time. They're like, why don't you, you own a training site. Why don't you study more? Why don't you do this? I'm like, because I just enjoy playing. I like to sit down at the tables and play. And if I am a break-even player for the rest of my life, I'll be perfectly content,
Yeah.
Doesn't mean, yeah, it doesn't mean I don't want to win tournaments. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt when I bust them, or when I see a top prize of X number of dollars and I don't win that amount. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. But I just know what I enjoy, and I have a lot of things going on, and so I have to divvy up my time in certain ways, and I just don't divvy a ton of it to studying. And I know it's the weirdest thing for a training site operator to be saying, but just self-evaluate yourself and figure out what you love about this game, and just focus on that. Do that.
And to kind of expand on that can go even beyond poker to other areas of your life. Just if you enjoy something for just doing it or experiencing it, then just do that. Like, if that's if that's what's calling out to you as something that you want to do, then there's no there's no downside to just doing something because you get pleasure from it, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
but if you do want to improve and play well, then invest your time and energy into improving and playing well. Like if that's your drive, if that's what drives you, but just understand what drives you and don't just do something because somebody else told you it's what you ought to be doing. You know, kind of look within yourself and follow your own bliss as it relates to, you know, not just your poker journey, but your life journey as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that 100%.
I did want to mention that you're a Twitch partner. And so you do enjoy playing poker. What about streaming poker? Is that a thing that you love?
Yeah, in fact, I've actually I've said this on my stream a bunch. I actually think I would play way less poker if I didn't stream on Twitch. I don't think I would quit poker. I don't know if poker players ever really quit playing poker. They just play it less, you know, but I honestly think I'd probably like play a day a week or 2 days a week, you know, maybe a week, you know, maybe play on weekends or one night with buddies or whatever. But I've learned, and I guess this kind of goes back to that community aspect of poker that I enjoy so much. I've really learned to love the streaming part of poker. And it's certainly something that's, I shouldn't say certainly, it's probably something that's negative EV to your poker game to stream on Twitch, particularly the way I do it, because you're distracted, you know, you're keeping track of chat, you're, you know, you're doing social media, you're changing your titles, you're doing all this different stuff when you should just be focusing on poker. But I feel like it's the minus EV part of it is sort of negated by the fact that I get enjoyment out of it, and therefore I play more, which hopefully just helps me outrun variance eventually. So I really, really like it. I really only got into it on accident. I remember seeing something about Jason Somerville streaming on this thing called Twitch, which I had no idea what that was. So I went to Twitch and I was like, well, I don't see Jason Somerville streaming, but I see this guy, Jamie Staples, streaming. I guess I'll just check out his channel. And so I watched it for like a day or two and I was like, this is kind of cool. Like, it's kind of fun to watch. And then I think I saw him like put a command in for something like, oh, if you want to use this HUD I'm using, like click this link. And I was like, oh, wait, I could promote Tournament Poker Edge on this platform. This could be really good. So I basically created my Twitch channel for the sole purpose of promoting Tournament Poker Edge. I didn't really know what I was going to do yet. I assumed I would just play poker, but I was like, maybe I'll just run TP videos on it all day, or maybe I'll just get on there and talk, or I'll figure something out. So I started it, and then I did like 1 or 2 streams, and then the next thing I know, I'd done 5, and then I'd done 50, and now I think I'm coming up on December will be my 6-year anniversary of streaming on Twitch. So I got addicted to it, and now I don't even really think of it as a promotional tool anymore. I mean, I do have a command somewhere for TP, but it's not like I just spend all day plugging Tournament Poker Edge. I just enjoy it for the pure pleasure of doing it.
Yeah, there's 2 things that it feels like resonates with you, right? There's the community aspect, and there's also the performance aspect, right? Like growing up, wanting to be in a rock band, like choosing to pursue that path. And then Twitch, it is a type of performance and interaction with the viewers.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of why I always say to people, like, people come into my stream, they're like, oh, talk about your hands more, or can you tell us why you did that? I'm like, nah, I'm good. I always say, I'm really more of a poker entertainment stream. I will talk a little strategy here and there, but mostly I just like to have fun and play poker. And I'll say to them, like, hey, if you want a really good educational stream, go check out this channel or go check out this streamer or whatever. Because that's just not really what I do. And I'm not here to try to compete with Lex Feldhaus or, any of these like, Tonka or any of these like absolute crushers. I'm just here to have a good time, hang out with the people who like to hang out with me. And and I never really thought about that, but probably get a little of that rock star attitude out of myself, like, I couldn't be a rock star, but I can be a rock star for 30 people on Twitch.
There you go. I think too, like you mentioned that it's negative EV to stream, and I would wholeheartedly agree. I've streamed some myself, and it does take your attention away from the tables, interacting, answering questions, knowing that you're trying to be entertaining to these people who are investing their time into you. And like, that's a burden that is, it's heavy while, you're trying to play poker at a high level and stream at the same time. And so my suggestion to all the folks that, want to try to stream is like, at least try to figure out a reason why streaming is something you ought to be doing. Like, do you love the community aspect of it like you, right? Like, will that make you play more? Do you find joy in that? Like, that's a good enough reason right there to lose some EV. Do you want to sell private coaching? Do you want to, promote your brand or build a brand or something like that? Like, do you have a business model behind the stream? Like, these are also questions that are fairly important. So like, maybe you lose some hourly rate on, the actual time you spend playing, but you gain that back downstream with different revenue sources. So like, at least have a plan for your stream. I would say like, it's another thing where don't just stream to stream. If you have no plan, like at least have a reason why you're choosing to do what you want to do.
Yeah. I think it's important too to understand how difficult it is to build up an audience. I've had a lot of people who are like, oh, I love your stream. I'm going to start a stream. And then a month later, they're like, I'm only getting like 3 viewers. What's going on? And I'm like, dude, I've been streaming for 6 years and sometimes I get like 20. Like, and the reality is I've never really averaged more than like 80 to 100. When I first started, you could go to the Twitch directory and there might be 6 people streaming. Like, it was so small and there was nobody from the United States. I think like the first were like me and like Dutch Boyd and like maybe 2 or 3 other people who I'm now forgetting who don't stream anymore. So it was pretty easy. And honestly, like I've said this before, I don't even think I would get partnered today. Like if I was streaming at the numbers I'm streaming at, I just happened to stream at to get into it at exactly the right time. And they were like, oh, we were really trying to push this poker platform. Like we should probably add some new partners. And they're like, well, there's 5 people streaming, partner them all. But yeah, so, you recognize how difficult it is to gain viewers. And if gaining viewers or making money from Twitch is your goal, you might be setting yourself up for some failure. Doesn't mean you shouldn't go for it, but just be prepared to know that you might fail. But like you said, if you just love doing it and you love the community part of it and it's just fun, fuck yeah, go for it.
It's hard work. I mean, you got to show up on a regular basis. It's hard work. Like comparatively, the market is much larger now than it was when there were 5 folks streaming, but also the competition is way more fierce as well, as far as the number of people who are all vying for folks' attention. And so, yeah, it's tough to break in. You need like your own little unique angle, and you probably need to make some connections with some of the higher level streamers so that they can, give you some boost when you need it. But yeah, it's a grind. Don't expect to just fire up a stream and you get 1,000 people who are super interested in what you have to say, your story, and how you go about playing cards.
Yeah. And I made the mistake of committing to trying to stream every day this month. And we're 11 days in and I'm somewhat regretting it. It's kind of for charity, so it's cool. Like I can deal with it, but it's becoming a grind. Cause I think a lot of things people don't realize is how much goes on when you're not streaming that you have to do to keep streaming, creating graphics and doing the social media stuff and updating your OBS and all YouTube videos and all the stuff that you have to do. I mean, there's hours and hours of stuff that happens behind the scenes that the people watching don't even see. So if I think I've done about 50 or 60 hours of streaming in the last 10 days, but then there's probably another 20 hours of other work involved. So it's like, I've already put in a month's worth of work. I'm 10 days in and I'm exhausted,
Yeah. It's the same with podcasts and just really almost any content that is produced that, you, the listener, consumes. It takes a ton of energy to produce this and put it out, especially if it's produced at somewhat of a high level. I mean, you could produce something that is absolutely atrocious very, very quickly, but I don't know that that's going to help you reach your goals in the way that you want. And everything is way more complex. Everything is way more complicated, and everything takes way more longer than you anticipate. At least this is my experience.
Yeah. And I got to say props to you because I mentioned earlier, I was kind of scrolling through some of the podcasts today and you've put out a ton of content and it sounds like you have a ton more already in the can. And I think back to when the TPE podcast started and, we were putting out episodes every 2 weeks and that was a lot of work. And then it kind of started to become once a month. And then it was like once every 2 months. And it's just really a lot of work to put a podcast together. So we ended up essentially handing the reins of that off to Clayton Fletcher. And he's done a great job with it. But man, to the people who like continually put out content, podcast or otherwise, like on a weekly basis or whatever, I just have so much like respect for it because it's just a ton of work.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm trying every day. I'm trying to start producing one episode a day. Like this is what I'm trying to build towards, and I'm getting the pieces in place. But like the reality is, with private coaching, with having product launches and launching the podcast, writing intros, promoting it on social media, like there's so much behind the scenes work. Like I make content for pokercoaching.com now. So I have responsibility to make that content on a regular basis as well. So like it's hard work churning all of this stuff out. And like what I'm learning is, my process first and foremost has to be pretty streamlined. So if you're looking to approach any one of these content creation endeavors, make sure you iron out your process, handwrite it, look at it, see what makes sense, see what you can optimize, ask the question of like, do I have to do this part of it? Like, is this absolutely necessary if it's a major pain point? And if it's not, then you can either hire it out or do something that's a little bit different that takes less time. But like always measure your process. And yeah, it's tough. It's that's why I lean on my guests, right? That's why I'm not monologuing every single day. I just bring somebody in, have them tell their story, and that makes my life a lot easier.
Well, and I'm sure you can relate to this too. And I mean, one of the biggest challenges we always found, and I still find to this day in all the things that I do involving poker, is that you're essentially working with a community of people who got into poker because they didn't want to be told where to be at what time and what they had to do on a certain day. And so that can make it really tough. You hit up somebody like, hey, can you make a video for TP next month or whatever? And then next month comes around, like, oh yeah, I'm not going to be playing poker this month. Maybe next month I'll make a video. Or with podcast guests, like, oh man, totally forgot. Sorry. Can we do that next month? It's just like, but you can't really be mad at it because it's why we all got into this. It's like, it's like we don't want a boss. We want to do what we want to do. So it's like, hey, I understand,
What's interesting is like when I had first launched the podcast, I had a major problem getting people to show up on time. Like it was like a major issue. And then like as I've produced more and more episodes and had some more high profile guests, people are tending to show up on time much better now than they used to. But I had another podcast before this one, completely separate thing. And it was interviewing high performers and, just basically trying to figure out how they spent their time and their energy. And those people, man, they could book it 6 months in advance, never hear a word from them for 6 months and show up on the dot at the exact time that they're supposed to show up, right? Poker players, at the beginning, it was like, they know they're supposed to meet with me yesterday and it's 3 p.m. and they're nowhere to be found.
Yeah. So I'm so used to that. I will say it does seem like it's gotten better over time. And I think that probably has to do with poker players are starting to realize that there is more opportunity in this game beyond just playing poker. And I think people start to figure out like that it's important to grow your brand and to grow your social media presence and things like that.
Look, I totally get it. You feel like being a lone wolf in your poker journey has hamstrung your ability to realize your full potential. So I'm about to give you a golden opportunity to plug into a supportive tribe that will be the poker family you've always wished you had. How much money would you give for 1 hour of interactive group coaching led by myself, Coach Thomas, and occasionally past guests of the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast? For now, and this will absolutely change at some point in the near future, the price of admission to the live Poker Power Hour is 100% free. All you got to do to get your invite is head to chasingpokergreatness.com and hop on the VIP newsletter. No more excuses, no more procrastination. It's time to take action and put yourself in position to turn your poker dreams into reality. I hope to see that beautiful face of yours in just a couple of days.
What's interesting here is not something that I've thought about is that, when you started TPE back in 2010, all the people who were playing around that time have now gotten older, right? It's like 10 years down the road. And as we age, we start gaining maturity. Like when Jungle Man came on the show and I was doing research, I was like, oh, he's 29 years old. What the hell? How is he only 29 years old, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of these crushers, like back in the day, they're just 20, 21-year-old kids who aren't mature and have no real concept about time and life and responsibility. And like as a decade goes by, they mature a little and start showing up and, being more diligent about coming through when they give their word.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of interesting on the flip side too. Something that, we've started having conversations about. It's like, well, really, like a lot of the guys who run TPE now don't even really play poker. I mean, we're all, 11, 12 years older than when we started this adventure. People have had kids, people have gotten married, people have moved, people have gotten jobs. And it's like, I don't really like, I'm not saying that we don't still love doing Tournament Poker Edge, but at what point does it become a thing where it's like, well, now I'm 60 and, retired, and I'm just like chilling at my, my 55 and older community or whatever. Like, do I just still keep like editing the Tournament Poker Edge podcast every day, or do I do something else? Like, so it's kind of like it's an interesting sort of decision that I guess we'll have to make someday. Like, well, what do we do with this now? Like, we're all done. We don't do poker anymore. Luckily, we haven't gotten to that point yet, but I suppose we'll have to have that talk eventually.
Eventually, but you have your brand, and I'm sure that there will be folks who are willing to, take the baton when you guys are ready to hand it off at the end of the day. Sure. If you could gift all poker players one book to read, what would it be? It doesn't have to be a poker book. I
would gift them Crush It by Gary Vaynerchuk. Which was basically the book that convinced me to start Tournament Poker Edge. It basically, I don't want to give the whole premise away, but it basically just talks about the idea of waking up every day and deciding what you want to do and just doing that instead of sort of living by the rules of society or whatever. I mean, it's not like this big anarchist cookbook or anything, but it's really just the idea that you don't have to be miserable going to work every day. And I think that's important for people in the poker community for a bunch of reasons. One is the idea that we talked about, which is there are really cool, creative, innovative ways to generate revenue, make money while having fun playing poker. Doesn't necessarily have to be winning. But I also think there's people who play the game who are not truly enjoying it, but they're really particularly good at it. So they keep grinding, and maybe that's not the thing they really want to do. And then you have people who are stuck in jobs that they absolutely hate, really want to be professional poker players, but just are afraid of making that jump. And the book is really just all about making that jump and deciding that you're just going to do what you love to do, and that not, things aren't irreversible. Like when I got into poker, I could have easily just flipped the switch and gone back to marketing and did, gone back, moved to LA and got back in the music business, or just switched careers altogether. But you just don't know until you make that jump. So, so I think that's what it would be.
Awesome, man. If you could erect a billboard, every poker player's got to drive past on the way to the casino, what does it say?
Great question. Jeez. I'm trying to visualize myself. More rake is better? No, that wouldn't be it. Have fun. I think it would just say have fun. I don't know. I'm not as old as some of the people who talk about how they miss the old days of poker and the characters and the fun that people used to have at the tables and stuff. And I'm not so young that I put my hoodie, sunglasses, and headphones on and just bury myself into my cards. But there would be a really nice middle ground there somewhere, I think. It just seems like there's a lot of people not having a good time at the tables. And I think if we could all just kind of loosen up a little bit, and it's not to say, hey, I understand there's things you can do at the table to be more plus EV, hide tells, blah, blah, blah. But man, at least, can we just all at least be nice to each other? Like, that would be kind of cool.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. And coming from a cash game player, like, yeah, maybe you can give up some minor bits of EV by interacting and being engaging at the poker table, but you're doing it. You're spending your life force playing this game for like 12 hours a day. Like, losing a tiny bit of EV that, may or may not even be real is not worth, it's not worth it gaining that extra piece of EV by just being miserable the whole time that you're playing this game. And like, you never know what relationships you can build just from the folks that you're battling with on a day-to-day basis, what opportunities might come down the pipeline for you if you are a little bit engaging. And you don't have to be like ultra outgoing, but just be a pleasant human to play poker with. I mean, I think it's just good for the game. It's good for you. It's just good on multiple fronts.
Yeah. Good. And it goes for away from the table too. It's okay to be a good dude out away from the table as well.
Right. Like, let's just be cool people all around.
Yeah.
What's your current big goal as related to TPE?
Yeah, that's interesting too. Because I think there's some easy answers that would be like, well, we want to be the biggest poker training site in the world, or we want to sign the best pro to be our ambassador or whatever. But I really don't think any of that is true. We've really always treated TPE the way that we intended to when we started, which was that community aspect. It's why we've never thought of ourselves as competitors with Run It Once, or I don't know, like Raise Your Edge, or whatever some of the other big training sites are, or even poker coaching, because we really wanted it to be more of a place for people to congregate than to watch PO Solver videos, I don't think we have a single actually, Andrew Brokus has probably done some PO Solver videos, but it's never really been our intention. So yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I guess it would just be to have the ability to do it as long as we want to and still enjoy it. Like, I would hate for it to end before we wanted it to. I think that's probably it's a simplistic goal, but I would love to just be able to keep doing it as long as we want to do it. If it had ended a year in because of Black Friday, it would have crushed my soul, and I don't know if it would be quite as painful now, but if we can call it a day, and whether that means, like you said, passing the baton to somebody else, or selling it, or just shutting and turning the lights off one day, whatever the decision is, I'd at least like to be able to do it on our terms. I don't want it to be another thing where another Black Friday, and this time we're not going to survive.
I hope that there's not a second Black Friday. I hope that if you survive the first one, you're should feel fairly safe right now.
Yeah, I really hope so. It's weird. I actually kind of was interested to see what this whole COVID era was going to do for poker. And it was a really interesting progression. And you might have even seen the same thing in some of your sort of business dealings, but it was kind of like this initial rush. We were all kind of confused about what was happening in the world and stuff. And we had this kind of initial rush of people like, oh, I'm out of work, or I'm working from home now, so I'm kind of getting back into poker. So, I'm signing back up. And I was like, wow, is this going to end up being like some sort of weird silver lining situation where memberships are up and podcast listens are up and more people are playing poker. And for the first 2 or 3 months, it was like, wow, this is I won't say it was great because people were dying, obviously, but I'm like, this is a silver lining, at least there's something cool coming out of this. But then all of a sudden it kind of flipped, and all of a sudden you started getting the calls. It's like, well, it was cool, I was out of work, so I started playing poker, but I'm still out of work, and now I have no money, so I need to cancel. And it was kind of like this, oh shit, maybe this wasn't the silver lining that we thought it was going to be. So yeah, it's been like this really interesting dynamic, and I was like, is this the new poker boom? I really thought it could have been the new poker boom for a minute. And then within a couple months, I was like, wait, is this kind of another Black Friday where everybody's just going to quit because the economy crashes and everyone? I was like, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
And it really just ended up kind of flattening out, and life just kind of moved forward in a weird way. But I feel like it could have gone either way there for a second.
Yeah, there was a lot of things happening all at once. I mean, it was a very chaotic time just in the world in general. And I think that podcast listens for sure have gone down. I know that they went down about 20 to 30% pretty much straight away, and they've maintained that throughout the course of COVID. I thought too that people are at home more, maybe they listen to podcasts more, but I think the reality is people listen to podcasts when they're at the gym and when they're driving to work and when they're flying on planes. And if you can't do that, they just would probably prefer to watch videos, I guess. So that was an interesting development, was podcast numbers across the board are pretty much down because people can't travel.
Yep. Yeah, it was really strange. It was the first time in a while that I had really kind of dug into analytics and stuff for the podcast, for the website, for YouTube. And it was just kind of interesting to see numbers fluctuating here and there. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, the real next poker boom would probably be federal regulation of online poker. I mean, that's really, I guess, what we're all kind of hoping for, or waiting for. Because the reality is, like, there's a lot of people like me and you and probably all the people who listen to your podcast who understand what the landscape looks like right now. They know how to play online. They know how to do it as safely as they can, et cetera, et cetera. But man, there are swaths of the country where people just think, no, you can't play poker anymore. They shut down full tilt. I remember when that happened a decade ago, and it's like, oh no, you can still play. It's not as maybe as easy as it used to. Well, it really kind of is as easy as it used to be, but there's a lot of people who just don't know it. And so if all of a sudden you just had this news breaking, like, hey, Americans, you can play online poker again. I mean, it would be I think it would be a mass rush to the tables.
It would be massive.
Yeah.
I think that there's just a massive percentage of the population that hasn't played poker for the last 10 years. I mean, this is kind of the rise of poker bros, right? Like poker bros is like an easier way where you know somebody who runs a game and then you just hand them money and they deposit it and then they pay you out like kind of manually. I think just the success of poker bros goes to show you that when you reduce the barrier to entry and you reduce the friction as far as depositing money, people want to play. People will gladly give money to make deposits.
Yeah. Yeah. And hey, states, you need some revenue to help deal with COVID? We have an idea for you.
Yeah. First, legalize poker and then legalize weed too.
Yep.
While you're at it.
Yeah. Super easy.
What's a project you're working on that's near and dear to your heart?
So right now it's kind of another passion project. It happened very similar to the way that TPE ended up happening. When TP was kind of at its prime, it was, I won't say it was running itself, but it was running very smoothly. And we had hired some people to do a lot of stuff. And it was like, so I had some free time finally. And I had gotten into craft beer, and I was like, I would really be interested in getting involved in the craft beer industry. And I didn't really want a full-time job, but I wanted to learn about it. And a friend of mine had started a brewery, and he knew a guy who already had started a brewery years before, and they were looking for a social media person to come in and do social media for 1 hour a day. They basically just needed somebody to like take a photo, tweet it, do Facebook, blah, 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 and then just turn off your computer. So I met with that guy about that job, and he's like, we had a great interview, and he came back a couple of days later. And he's like, Derek, he goes, you're just way too qualified. He goes, I'm not going to pay you like $11 a day to do social media for me. And I was like, no, you don't have to pay me. I'll do it for free. And he's like, no. He goes, what I'm saying is I would need to pay you more. Like I would feel bad paying you so little. I was like, oh, damn. But a year later, he contacted me back and he goes, hey, we're looking at ramping up and doing something more, bigger with our marketing. Would you be willing to come in and work half-time? And I'm like, that's perfect, because I have my poker stuff I need to do anyway, so I'll come in and do it. So I came on board, did that for the craft brewery for 4 years, and then I decided I was going to move to Las Vegas. My son had graduated, gone to college, and me and my wife were just kind of ready for a new change. So sort of similar to what we did when we came here. We were like, well, where should we go? And my wife said, would it be like a good thing for your business to move to Vegas? And I'm like, well, it's not necessary because we're an online company. I said, but yeah, there'd be some benefits to living in Vegas. So she's like, all right, well, let's move to Vegas then. So we moved to Vegas, and basically once a week I would talk to my old boss from the brewery, and he would be like, hey, I started a distillery. Will you come back and do marketing for me? And I'm like, no, I'm good. I moved to Vegas. I'm really enjoying it here. We'd have this conversation once a week. And finally he said, all right, what do I have to do to get you to come back and do marketing for me? And I just kind of threw out like a bunch of stuff. I'm like, well, if you do this and give me that, and I'm allowed to like work in this way and everything. And he's like, okay, done. I was like, no, you weren't supposed to say yes. Yeah. So basically I moved back here. Gosh, I guess it's almost 2 years ago now. In fact, I think it's almost exactly 2 years. I moved back to Durham, North Carolina, and we've started this distillery. It's just a little over 2 years old, and I'm actually going to like the grand. Well, it's not like a grand opening. It's like a friends and family event for the a location that we opened downtown for the distillery. So I'm actually heading to that today. So that's kind of like my current like project that I'm really passionate about and into. I'm enjoying. One thing I've learned in all these things I've done over my career is that I really enjoy the build almost more than I enjoy like reaching the goal. Like I just really enjoy Like when I sat down, I was like, well, we have 0 Twitter followers. We have 0 Instagram followers. We have 0. And so I just love waking up every day and going, oh, we got 3 more, like that's the stuff that I love.
Yeah.
So I am really enjoying this process. I happen to really enjoy bourbon. So it's like a perfect mix. And it's much like, I know I keep coming back to this concept, but it is a very community-based profession. Like same with craft beer and craft spirits. Like it's all about like people coming together and socializing and having a good time while building a business. So that's keeping me really busy. In fact, sometimes some days too busy, but right now I'm enjoying it.
I'm right there with you. I love the journey. I love the building aspect, getting excited when somebody signs up to the email newsletter and when somebody, buys some kind of course that I put out. I'm like, sweet, like it's working. People are doing things that theoretically I thought they might, but they're actually in reality doing it too. So I love the journey of, building and seeing that growth. It's a fun thing. And it's another one of those things that in some ways is a lot of work. It is a lot of hassle starting out with 0 Twitter followers, but in other ways, it's part of the journey. Enjoy the journey, have fun doing all the things, and eventually just keep making good decisions and showing up and working hard. And you have a business that's ran for now 10 years, right?
Yeah. I always say like, one thing I know about measuring success as it relates to Tournament Poker Edge is that I don't remember getting our 1,000th member or our 5,000th member. But I do remember getting our first member, and I can remember sitting at my desk, and I can remember the email because we had just turned the website on, like 5 minutes earlier or whatever, and we had started to generate an email list and stuff like that well before launching the site. So turned the website on, sent the email blast out, and then boom, the first member came, and I was like, oh my God, we did it! We created a thing that somebody could actually sign up for, and they did. That I think that's the feeling you kind of keep chasing. It's like, when will I sell my first bottle of bourbon? When will I sell my first beer? Like, and you learn to just thrive off of that feeling, which is why, in all honesty, I'll probably do this distillery thing for 5 years, and then I'll probably be into some new passion, and I'll start another company. Just do it all again.
Well, the first person is validation, right? It means that somewhere out there that exists in the world, there is one soul that decided your thing was worth it enough to pull out their credit card and buy it. And from that one person, you can kind of realize like, oh, I'm kind of onto something here. There's like a market for this. And that gives you a little hope to continue pressing forward.
Yep.
Well, Derek, it's been great having you. And the final question is, where can the Chasing Poker Greatness audience find you on the World Wide Web?
So I am on Twitch every few days, twitch.tv/killingbird. And you can find me on Twitter, which is at Derek Tenbusch. My screen name comes from a band that I used to be in. So that band still has my has the name Killingbird on Twitter. So you have to find me at Derek Tenbusch. Although if you type in Killingbird, you'll pretty much find me because they haven't tweeted in like 5 years. Those are my 2 primary spots. I am on Instagram and all that stuff, but I mostly reside on Twitch and Twitter. So
cool. And click through the show page on chasingpokergreatness.com and you'll see the links to Derek's Twitter and Derek's Twitch, as well as Tournament Poker Edge.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, man. I always love talking poker, and it was particularly cool to talk about it with somebody who kind of has a similar sort of entrepreneurial spirit. So cheers to that.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. And happy to have you back anytime.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Chasing Poker Greatness. If you have yet to subscribe to the show, please take a second to do so on Apple Podcasts or wherever your favorite place to listen to podcasts may be. For more content from me, Coach Brad, please visit our YouTube channel at youtube.com/enhanceYourEdge, and I'll see you next time.